Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Adapting books to the screen is no easy feat, especially when it comes to multi-volume works with a rich, detailed world like Harry Potter. The main goal of any adaptation is to preserve the essence and spirit of the story while keeping as many important details as possible. But unfortunately, that's not always achievable. Let's take a look at 8 controversial moments that left many viewers puzzled, but are easily explained if you've read the books. Number 1. Why did Harry, Ron and Hermione visit Hagrid at night? Philosopher's Stone. In the film, the trio suddenly heads to Hagrid's hut at night, only to be caught by Malfoy, who reports them to McGonagall. It seems illogical. Why not go during the day? Why not use the invisibility cloak? In reality, the scene was changed. In the book, Ron is bitten by the dragon Norbert and is recovering in the hospital wing. Harry and Hermione must take Norbert up to the astronomy tower so Charlie Weasley's friends can pick him up. They use the invisibility cloak to stay hidden. Malfoy learns of the plan after intercepting Ron's letter, which included the time and location of the handoff. Number 2. How did Ginny know Harry had the diary? Chamber of Secrets. In the film, Ginny steals Riddle's diary from Harry's dorm room, but it's never explained how she knew he had it. In the book, the logic is clear. On Valentine's Day, Ginny saw the diary fall out of Harry's bag during a scuffle with Malfoy. That was enough for her to realize where it was. This scene was cut from the film. Number 3. Why does Expelliarmus work differently? Prisoner of Azkaban. Expelliarmus is one of Harry Potter's signature spells, but in the films its effects are inconsistent. Lupin simply knocks Harry's wand out of his hand, but when Snape is hit by the same spell, he gets knocked out cold. The books clarify this. Harry, Ron and Hermione all cast Expelliarmus at Snape simultaneously. The combined force made the spell much stronger, causing him to lose consciousness. In the movie, it looked as if Expelliarmus itself could knock someone out. Number 4. What happened to Barty Crouch Jr., Goblet of Fire? When it's revealed that Barty Crouch Jr. was impersonating Mad-Eye Moody for the entire school year, a logical question arises. Why didn't the Ministry believe Voldemort was back if they had a living witness? The book explains it. When Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge came to interrogate him, the Dementor accompanying him suddenly performed the kiss, sucking out Crouch's soul without instruction. As a result, the key witness was rendered useless. He could no longer speak or think. Number 5. Why didn't Harry ask an adult for help? Order of the Phoenix. When Harry sees a vision of Sirius being captured, he tries to warn Snape by calling Sirius Padfoot. The problem is, in the films, this nickname had never been mentioned, so viewers didn't understand what Harry was trying to say. Then things escalate. Instead of confirming whether Sirius is really missing, Harry and his friends rush straight to the Ministry. In the book, Harry uses the fireplace in Umbridge's office to check Grimmauld Place. There, Kreacher the house elf tricks him by saying, "Sirius isn't home." This key moment is left out of the film. Number 6. Where did the Weasleys get the money to open their shop? Half-Blood Prince. In the 6th film, the Weasley twins open their magical joke shop. Viewers were confused. How could they afford it, given that the Weasley family was always poor? The book provides the answer. After winning the Triwizard Tournament, Harry gave Fred and George his 1,000 galleon prize money. He asked them to follow their dream and open the shop. This generous act is never shown in the film. Number 7. Why didn't Dumbledore defend himself against Draco? Half-Blood Prince. In one of the most dramatic scenes in the series, Draco disarms Dumbledore and the headmaster doesn't fight back. Why? In the book, Dumbledore's actions are deliberate. He had just immobilized Harry, who was hidden under the invisibility cloak, to keep him safe and out of sight. Dumbledore willingly gave up his defense to protect Harry. The film skipped these few seconds, leaving viewers puzzled. Number 8. What was the shard Harry had? Deathly Hallows. Part 1, the shard of mirror that helps save Harry and his friends, appears out of nowhere with barely any explanation. The film briefly hints at a connection to Aberforth Dumbledore, but in the book it's made clear. Sirius had given Harry a two-way mirror to communicate. Harry shattered it in grief after Sirius's death, but kept a fragment that still retained magic. It was through that shard that Aberforth saw Harry was in danger and came to the rescue. Number 9. Why Voldemort didn't feel the Horcruxes. Horcrux after Horcrux falls. The diary, the locket, the cup, the diadem, each one shattered, each one gone. In the film, Voldemort twitches, grabs his head, screams once or twice, but it ends there. Quick, shallow, no explanation. But in the book, it's deeper, more haunting. Voldemort doesn't feel them die, not really, not fully. Just a chill, a flicker of unease. Something's wrong, but he doesn't know what. Can't name it, can't trace it. His soul is too far gone. He split it too many times, over and over, with murder, with dark magic. Each time he tore it further. He has mutilated his soul, Dumbledore says, beyond recognition. What's left isn't whole, isn't human, it's shattered glass. So when a Horcrux dies, Voldemort doesn't feel pain. He feels nothing, or something like fear, but without a source. An itch he can't scratch, a scream with no mouth. He senses loss, but doesn't know what he's losing. That's why he doesn't protect them. He thinks they're safe, eternal, untouchable. He believes his magic is perfect. His hiding place is flawless. But the more they vanish, the more unsteady he becomes. The mask starts to crack.
Number 10. How Neville got the sword.
Hogwarts is burning. The battle rages, screams, fire, stone crumbling. In the middle of it all stands Neville Longbottom, alone, face to face with Voldemort. And he doesn't run.
Voldemort sneers, offers mercy, offers a place at his side. Neville stares him down. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he shouts. The air shifts. Something ancient awakens. Not magic. Bravery.
Voldemort forces the sorting hat onto Neville's head, a cruel joke. Flames burst from it. The crowd watches in horror, but Neville doesn't scream, doesn't beg. Inside the fire, something gleams. Cold steel. Godric Gryffindor's sword. It's the same sword Harry pulled from the hat in Chamber of Secrets. The same one that appeared for him when no one else could help. Dumbledore once said, only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat. Now it's Neville's turn.
The sword doesn't come to the strong or the famous. It comes to the brave, the truly brave. Neville doesn't just resist Voldemort. He defies him, alone, in front of everyone. That's what calls the sword.
He grabs the hilt. Fire dies, time freezes, then he moves. One swing, one strike. Nagini's head hits the ground. The last Horcrux is gone. Voldemort loses a piece of his soul. Right there, in front of everyone. Number 11, Where Winky Went and Why It Matters. In the Goblet of Fire movie, Winky is missing, completely erased. No name, no role, no clue she ever existed. But in the book, she matters. A lot. Winky isn't just another house elf. She's the key to the darkest secret in the Crouch family. Winky served Barty Crouch, senior faithful, nervous, eyes always wide. She worshipped her master, and she kept a secret no one else knew. His son, Barty Crouch Jr., wasn't dead. He wasn't in Azkaban. He was alive, at home, hidden under the Imperious curse. Years ago, Mrs. Crouch made a deal. One last visit to her son in Azkaban. A switch. She took Polyjuice potion, disguised herself, took his place in prison. She died there. He went free, but not fully. His father locked him up, controlled him. And Winky watched it all. She cared for him, fed him, read to him. And when the Quidditch World Cup came, she begged. "Let Master Barty see the match," she said, "just once." Crouch Sr. agreed. A terrible mistake. During the chaos, Barty Jr. escaped. And Winky was found holding a wand. Crouch panicked. His secret was slipping. So he punished her, harshly. "You have failed me," he said. He fired her on the spot, in public. Winky collapsed, sobbing. "Winky is a good elf," she cried. "Winky didn't mean to." She ended up at Hogwarts, brought in by Dobby, but she wouldn't work. She just drank butterbeer, cried all day, missed her master, kept his secrets. "Winky doesn't speak of the family," she whispered. But the truth was boiling under the surface. Hermione noticed, asked questions, got pieces, slowly. And through Winky's sorrow the puzzle came together. Barty Jr. had broken free, taken Polyjuice, turned into Mad-Eye Moody, fooled everyone, even Dumbledore. Number 12. What the Order of Merlin means for Lockhart. Gilderoy Lockhart loved to talk about himself, his fame, his books, his hair, and especially his awards. 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award, he beamed. But the one he mentioned with the most pride was the Order of Merlin, 3rd Class. The films never explain it, just a fancy title, but in the wizarding world it means much more. The Order of Merlin is the highest honor in magical Britain. It's like being knighted, only rarer, reserved for wizards who show great bravery, achievement, or service to society. Albus Dumbledore has one, 1st Class, for defeating Grindelwald. That's the level we're talking about. It's not handed out for writing books or winning smiles. Lockhart bragged about his 3rd Class award like it was pure gold. He made it sound like he'd saved villages, fought banshees, defeated dark creatures, but none of it was true. Every tale he told was stolen, taken from real heroes, wiped from their memories with a flick of his wand. He admits it later, deep in the tunnels under Hogwarts, when the lies fall apart. The hero stuff's made up, he shrugs. But the books sell well, don't they? The Order of Merlin wasn't proof of greatness, it was proof of deception. A medal built on the silence of others. In the book, his fraud is obvious. He tries to obliviate Harry and Ron, to erase their memories too, just like he did to all the others, but the spell backfires. His wand, taken from Ron, explodes, and Lockhart loses his own mind. The ultimate irony. A liar who forgot the truth, even about himself. That moment hits harder when you know what the Order of Merlin means. It's supposed to represent honor, legacy, history. Lockhart turned it into a joke. He wore it like costume jewelry. Shiny, empty, fake. Number 13. Why Pettigrew died differently in the book.
Peter Pettigrew dies fast in the movie. Blink, and it's over. A short struggle, a flash. He's gone. No explanation, no meaning, just another nameless casualty. Viewers barely notice. Some don't even realize he died. But the book tells a different story.
In Deathly Hallows, his death is slow, twisted, inevitable. Harry and Ron are trapped in the basement of Malfoy Manor. Pettigrew opens the door. He has orders. Kill them. No hesitation, no mercy. Voldemort's voice rings in his head, but something stops him. Harry looks him in the eye. "You owe me, Wormtail," he says. The words hit like a spell. Years ago, Harry had spared him. When Sirius and Lupin wanted revenge, Harry said no. "We're not killers." That moment changed everything, and now it's back. Pettigrew hesitates, just for a second. A flicker of guilt, a trace of the boy who once laughed with James. His wand lowers. That moment of weakness, it's fatal. The silver hand Voldemort gave him begins to move, on its own, cold, merciless. The hand he had been given by Voldemort was moving of its own accord, the book says. The fingers curl, tighten. Pettigrew gasps, claws at his throat. The hand doesn't stop. It knows, it punishes, it kills. He drops. No final words, no last plea, just silence. The hand chokes him for hesitating, for showing mercy. Voldemort built the trap himself. The hand wasn't a gift, it was control, a metal snake coiled around his neck. It's justice, dark, ironic, perfect. Pettigrew betrayed his friends, sold James and Lily to Voldemort, then betrayed Voldemort with a single pause. Both sides rejected him. In the end, he belonged to no one, not even himself. Number 14, why the Dursleys hated Harry. The Dursleys hated Harry from the start. Locked in a cupboard, fed scraps, shouted at for breathing too loudly. In the films, it looks like random cruelty, cold-hearted relatives who just don't care. But the truth? It's darker and far more human. Petunia Dursley had a sister, Lily, beautiful, kind, and magical. One day, Lily got a letter from Hogwarts. Petunia watched her sister leave, enter a world of spells and wonder, while she stayed behind, ordinary, forgotten. She got a letter and I didn't, Petunia spat, but behind her words was a wound, one that never healed. Petunia wrote a letter too, to Dumbledore. She begged him to take her, let her study magic, be part of it. She was rejected, no magic in her, no place at Hogwarts. That rejection burned deep. She never forgave it, not Lily, not Dumbledore, not the world that left her behind. And then one night, Lily died. A letter came again, this time from Dumbledore. Not an invitation, a burden, a baby, her sister's son, with those same green eyes. Her eyes, Petunia once whispered, just like hers. She hated those eyes because they reminded her of everything she wasn't. Vernon didn't help. He feared magic, called it nonsense, but he knew it was real. That's why he fought so hard to crush it, to stamp it out. In Harry, in their home, in every cupboard and locked door. There's no such thing as magic, he growled. But he was lying. To himself. Harry became the symbol of their failure, their shame, their fear. And Dudley, spoiled, loud, cruel, was their golden boy. 20 presents on his birthday. None for Harry. Not because Harry did wrong, but because he was a walking reminder of what they didn't understand and what they had lost.
Number 15, how Sirius escaped Azkaban.
Sirius Black escaped Azkaban, the most guarded prison in the wizarding world. No one ever had. No one was supposed to. In the movie, it just happens. Dumbledore says he's the first to escape Azkaban. It's unheard of. That's it. No real explanation, just a mystery, a man too powerful to be held. But that's not the full story. The book tells a different tale, a sharper, darker one. Sirius was not just brave, he was brilliant, dangerous, desperate, and very, very clever. He had a secret. He was an animagus. He could turn into a huge black dog. The Ministry never knew. The Dementors couldn't tell. They couldn't see me, he told Harry. They were confused, didn't know what to do. Dementors feed on emotions, human fear, pain, despair. But in his dog form, Sirius wasn't fully human. His emotions dulled, their power weakened. He stayed in that shape for days, weeks, maybe longer. It was the only way to survive. His mind stayed quiet. His rage stayed cold. Then came the spark, a newspaper, a photo. The Weasley family at Egypt. Ron had a rat on his shoulder, but Sirius knew better. That wasn't a rat. That was Peter Pettigrew, the man who betrayed James and Lily, the man who framed Sirius, the man who lived while Sirius rotted in a cell. That photo lit a fire. "I saw him," Sirius said, "alive on the boy's shoulder." That's when he knew he had to escape, not just to be free, but to protect Harry, to finish what James started, to kill the traitor. He didn't wait, didn't ask for help. He changed shape, squeezed through the bars, thin from starvation, driven by fury. Number 16. Why Voldemort chose Harry. It was a choice that would define the future of the wizarding world, yet it came down to one man's fear and one child's fate. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the film brushes past the prophecy that bound Lord Voldemort to Harry Potter. But in the pages of J.K. Rowling's book, the truth lies deeper, darker, and far more tragic than the silver screen dares to show. Voldemort chose his equal, or so he believed, and in doing so he crafted the very enemy the prophecy warned him about. The prophecy was not made in grandeur or during war, but in a dark, musty room at the Hog's Head Inn. Professor Sybil Trelawney, barely in control of her own voice, fell into a trance and spoke in a voice that did not belong to her. "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies." Dumbledore, the only other soul in the room who understood what it meant, was shaken. Yet the words did not reach Voldemort in full. Severus Snape, then a loyal Death Eater, overheard only part of the prophecy and brought it to his master. That incomplete fragment was enough to trigger a decision soaked in blood. Voldemort, fearing death above all things, saw in these words a threat to his power. A child would rise who could defeat him, and 2 children were born that very month, both to families who had defied Voldemort 3 times. Neville Longbottom, pure-blood son of Frank and Alice, Harry Potter, half-blood son of James and Lily. Either of them could have fulfilled the prophecy. But Voldemort, proud of his own half-blood lineage and scorning pure-blood traditions in private, made a decision based on his prejudice. He chose the boy he thought most likely to be a danger to him, Dumbledore explained to Harry in the Department of Mysteries. And in doing so he made you the one. It wasn't the prophecy that named Harry the chosen one, it was Voldemort's choice. In a sense, Voldemort created his own downfall. Neville had the same birthday month, the same defiant parents, and even a wand that could have worked great magic. But Voldemort dismissed him. Perhaps he saw Neville's shy disposition and underestimated his potential. Or perhaps it was his contempt for purebloods who clung to tradition. Whatever the case, Voldemort went after the Potters, and that one act sealed his fate. That Halloween night in Godric's Hollow, everything changed. Voldemort broke into the Potter home and murdered James without hesitation. Lily, however, stood in front of her son, begging for mercy. And when she refused to stand aside, Voldemort killed her too. But it was her act of sacrificial love that protected Harry and caused the Dark Lord's curse to rebound, tearing his soul from his body. "He failed to kill you with that curse," Dumbledore said quietly, "and so gave you powers and a destiny he never meant to bestow." The lightning bolt on Harry's forehead became the mark of that night, a symbol of survival. But it was more than a scar, it was a connection. Voldemort had left a piece of his soul inside the boy. "You are the 7th Horcrux, Harry," Dumbledore would later reveal. "Unintentionally created, a fragment of soul bound to yours from that night." This accidental bond meant that Harry could see into Voldemort's mind, feel his anger, his triumphs, his fears. It made them connected in a way the prophecy never specified. Neville Longbottom never had that connection. He grew up with his own share of suffering, his parents driven mad by Bellatrix Lestrange, but he never carried a piece of Voldemort inside him. He was brave, loyal, and grew into a hero in his own right. But he was not marked, and the prophecy had said, "And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal." Voldemort marked Harry, literally and symbolically. That was the difference. And yet Dumbledore was clear. Had Voldemort chosen Neville, then he would have marked him, and the prophecy would have twisted its path accordingly. It was never fate, but choice that mattered. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. Voldemort made a choice, and in that choice he gave the prophecy life. In the Ministry of Magic's Hall of Prophecies, the orb containing Trelawney's message rested among thousands of others. Only the people involved in the prophecy could retrieve it, Harry and Voldemort. That was proof of the prophecy's bond, tied not to potential, but to action. Neville could never have taken that orb, nor felt the searing heat of its truth. He had not been chosen, he had not been marked. It is tragic in its own way. Neville's life was defined by silence, shadowed by the what-if. His parents, heroes of the Order, were tortured into insanity. He grew up with his stern grandmother, often mocked for his forgetfulness, overlooked by teachers and ridiculed by classmates. But perhaps he was spared a worse fate. Had Voldemort chosen him, it might have been his mother begging for mercy. It might have been his blood spilled in Godric's Hollow. And who is to say his fate would have been better? Yet, as the war escalated, Neville rose. He wielded the sword of Gryffindor and led the resistance at Hogwarts. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he spat at Voldemort during the final battle. In that moment, the line between Harry and Neville blurred, both defiant, both brave, both worthy. But Harry alone had the scar, the soul fragment, and the tie that made him the only one who could end it. There's a haunting irony in Voldemort's choice. The man who feared death above all things, who sought immortality through Horcruxes and blood magic, ended up sealing his death by trying to avoid it. He looked into the future and tried to kill what he did not yet understand. He feared the prophecy and acted in haste, like a man who sees a storm coming and burns down his house to escape the rain. Number 17. How the Half-Blood Prince was revealed. In the dim corridors of Hogwarts, where secrets seemed to cling to the very stones like ancient dust, Harry Potter held a worn book in his hands. It was covered in nicks and ink stains, annotated in the margins with a sharp, elegant hand. The words inside it had helped him outperform Hermione in potions class, guided his hand like magic, more precise than any wand work. It was a strange intimacy, this connection between student and anonymous author. The cover had once read "Advanced Potion Making," but now the most significant thing about it was a scribbled note in the front. This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. The name intrigued Harry. Who was this prince? The boy or man had been brilliant, clearly a master of potions, but also someone with a ruthless, experimental streak. He had improved instructions, created spells. One in particular stood out, Sectum Sempra. Harry had used it on Draco Malfoy without knowing its effect. Blood had spilled across the bathroom floor, and only Snape's arrival had saved Draco from something unthinkable. That moment had shaken Harry. The spell was labelled simply, "For Enemies." Harry couldn't let go of the mystery. The book felt like a friend, and a dangerous one. Hermione disapproved, of course. "You shouldn't trust something when you can't see where it keeps its brain," she'd warned. But Harry, ever the impulsive Gryffindor, believed in instincts. And his instincts told him that the Half-Blood Prince wasn't evil, just misunderstood. Complex. Someone who knew what it meant to be angry, to be overlooked, to be brilliant and bitter at the same time. When Snape confronted Harry after the bathroom incident, he demanded to see the book. Harry lied. He couldn't give it up. The bond was too strong. He hid it in the room of requirement, placing it carefully inside a battered cabinet, as if laying an old friend to rest. That night, his sleep was haunted by flashes of crimson and echoes of the spell he had unleashed. Later, when Dumbledore lay dead at the foot of the astronomy tower and Snape fled into the night, the truth came out in a rush of anguish. Harry chased after the man who had killed his mentor, rage pounding in his veins. He screamed after Snape, unleashing spell after spell, but Snape blocked them all with lazy precision. Then Harry aimed one last blow, Sectum Sempra. The name was poison in his mouth now. Snape whirled. "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter?" His voice was quiet, deadly. "Yes, I am the half-blood prince." It was a revelation delivered like a slap. Harry stood frozen, the name crashing down on him with brutal clarity. Snape, the half-blood prince. It couldn't be, it shouldn't be. Snape, his nemesis, the man he had hated for years. How could that brilliance, that creativity in the margins, have belonged to him? But the book had never lied. The handwriting, crisp, authoritative, matched Snape's style. The spells, the precision. Harry had seen it all before, just never connected the pieces. And now the truth was out, and it felt like betrayal layered on betrayal. How many times had he admired the prince's mind, not knowing he was admiring Snape's? The movie ends here, leaving viewers dangling in confusion. Why had Snape called himself that? What did it mean? But the book does more. It fills in the missing pieces with the kind of detail that makes the mystery not just understandable, but tragic. In the original novel, J.K. Rowling unravels the story of the half-blood prince through quiet, devastating exposition. Snape's mother was named Eileen Prince, a witch from a pure-blood family. His father, Tobias Snape, was a muggle, a cruel, neglectful man. The combination made young Severus a half-blood caught between two worlds, a wizard by birthright, but scorned for his lineage. The name Half-Blood Prince was his rebellion, his creation, his armor.
"I was the half-blood prince," Snape admits in the book, standing at the edge of the battle, wand still raised. And it's not just a confession, it's a key to his soul. The name is stitched from pain and pride. He chose his mother's name, Prince, out of respect for her, and perhaps a silent rejection of the man who had given him nothing but suffering.
The teenage Severus Snape, brilliant and brooding, had carved an identity for himself in a world that refused to accept him. He had been poor, awkward, mocked by James Potter and Sirius Black. And yet in that tattered potions book, he had power. The classroom might have been a battlefield, but on the pages, he was king. Half-Blood Prince wasn't just a nickname, it was a declaration. Snape's spells, scattered through the book like secrets, reflected this same duality. Some were harmless improvements, shortcuts to complex potions. Others were darker. Levicorpus, a jinx to hoist someone into the air. Muffliato, a charm to keep conversations private. And of course, Sectum Sempra. Each spell was a fragment of his psyche, clever, inventive, but touched with cruelty. The tragedy deepens when you realize why Snape abandoned this persona. He grew up. He saw the price of obsession and pain. His love for Lily Evans, Harry's mother, was the only light in his life, and even that was stained by his choices. The boy who had once scribbled Half-Blood Prince in his books became the man who stood at Dumbledore's side, haunted by a single promise. Look at me. Lily's eyes, looking at him through her son at the moment of his death. The book never excuses Snape, but it does explain him. That's the difference. It doesn't ask for forgiveness, it offers understanding. The reveal of the Half-Blood Prince isn't a twist for the sake of drama. It's the culmination of a life marked by contradiction. Snape was a Death Eater who protected the boy he once called arrogant, a hero who killed his mentor, a villain who died for love. Number 18. Why Fleur and Bill's wedding felt rushed. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, the sudden appearance of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour's wedding leaves many film-only viewers puzzled. Up to this moment, Bill had barely been mentioned, let alone seen, and Fleur hadn't appeared since Goblet of Fire. The wedding seems abrupt, an event that arrives with no proper build-up or emotional investment. For someone unfamiliar with the books, it could even feel as though a new couple had been invented just for the sake of the plot. But in truth, their love story is long, layered, and full of meaning, one that began years before and was forged in moments of danger, loyalty, and defiance. Their first meeting happens in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Fleur, representing Beauxbaton, competes in the Triwizard Tournament at Hogwarts. She is elegant, proud, and a little aloof, a part-veiler whose beauty unsettles most of the male population at the school. Bill Weasley, then working at Gringotts in Egypt, comes to Hogwarts briefly during the third task. Though their interaction is barely mentioned at that point, J.K. Rowling later reveals in Half-Blood Prince that Fleur stayed on at Gringotts as an intern, and that's when their romance truly began. The spark was lit quietly behind the scenes, and while not shown explicitly, the novels let us piece together their love in ways that feel organic and honest. By the time Half-Blood Prince opens, Fleur is already living at the Burrow and preparing for her wedding with Bill. Her presence stirs up resentment from several Weasleys, particularly Molly and Ginny. Molly thinks Fleur is shallow and snobbish, while Ginny mocks her behind her back, calling her phlegm. Yet Bill remains utterly devoted, and Fleur, for all her perceived vanity, never falters in her love. When Bill is attacked by the savage werewolf Fenrir Greyback during the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, his face is savaged and permanently scarred. Molly tries to suggest that perhaps the wedding should be delayed or cancelled, expecting Fleur to withdraw. But Fleur's reaction becomes one of the most defining and redemptive moments of her character.
You thought I would not wish to marry him? Or perhaps you hoped? Fleur snaps at Molly, her eyes blazing with emotion. What do I care how he looks? I am good-looking enough for both of us, I think. All these scars show is that my husband is brave. This moment is pure defiance and love, a complete rejection of superficiality. Fleur's words cut through the doubt, and suddenly the Weasleys realize how wrong they were. Even Ginny, who once mocked her, begins to see her differently. It is a powerful moment, one that redefines Fleur in the eyes of the entire family and affirms the depth of her bond with Bill.
This moment in the book is deeply emotional, a testament to love surviving through adversity. It is also crucial in showing Bill's vulnerability. He, the adventurous, handsome, dragon-wrangling curse-breaker, is now left with permanent wounds. Yet in Fleur's eyes, he is unchanged. Their wedding becomes a celebration not only of love, but of loyalty and acceptance. It is a stand against war, fear, and superficial judgment. This makes the decision to proceed with the wedding sooner rather than later feel all the more natural. The urgency of the times, with Voldemort rising and Dumbledore gone, creates a backdrop where joy must be seized before it slips away. In contrast, the film adaptation fails to deliver this rich backstory. Bill is introduced suddenly with no previous scenes to develop his character or his relationship with Fleur. When he announces casually at the Burrow, "This is Fleur, we're getting married," it comes out of nowhere. Viewers who hadn't read the books were left to wonder, who is this man and why are we suddenly attending his wedding? His scars are briefly mentioned in passing, with a quip about being attacked by a werewolf, but there's no emotional weight, no Fenrir greyback, no horror, no family conflict, and certainly no moment of Fleur defending Bill's honor. This lack of context robs the wedding of its emotional gravity. Instead of being a symbol of love persisting through tragedy, it becomes a pretty but confusing set piece. The film replaces intimacy and family drama with spectacle, music, laughter, dancing. But without knowing what came before, the audience cannot fully understand what the ceremony represents. The cost of this storytelling choice is a missed opportunity to explore the quiet bravery of both Fleur and Bill. In the books, Fleur's transformation is one of the most rewarding arcs. Initially seen as haughty and superficial, she proves again and again that she is more than a pretty face. After her defense of Bill, she becomes fully accepted by the Weasley family. Molly offers her Aunt Muriel's goblin-made tiara for the wedding, a gesture of inclusion and respect. "Here comes the bride," calls out Fred at the wedding, and there is no trace of mockery anymore. The family has changed, and so has the reader's understanding of Fleur. Moreover, the wedding in the book serves a narrative purpose beyond the personal. It is the last moment of light before darkness descends. It is at the wedding that Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus bursts into the tent, proclaiming, "The ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming." It's a chilling interruption, shattering the celebration and throwing Harry, Ron, and Hermione into immediate flight. This juxtaposition of joy and horror encapsulates the tone of the final book. No moment of happiness is safe for long. Bill and Fleur's wedding also echoes the themes of unity and resistance. Guests from across the wizarding world come together, a defiance of the blood purity agenda rising under Voldemort's rule. Love, especially between a British wizard and a French part vila, becomes a quiet act of rebellion. It's not just a wedding, it's a declaration that the world Voldemort is trying to build will not be accepted. Number 19. Why Harry's green eyes matter. In the magical world of Harry Potter, few details seem trivial. Every scar, every line of dialogue, and every trait is placed with intention by J.K. Rowling. One of the most emotionally resonant of these details is the colour of Harry Potter's eyes. "So you have your mother's eyes, Goo," a sentence whispered through 7 books, echoing from the mouths of Severus Snape, Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, Dumbledore, and others who loved and remembered Lily Evans. In the books, this simple physical feature became a symbol of inheritance, memory, love, and sacrifice. And yet, when the beloved series came to life on screen, this essential detail was visually altered. Harry's iconic green eyes became blue. The reason? A practical one. Daniel Radcliffe, the actor who embodied Harry, had an allergic reaction to the green contact lenses. But the narrative weight of those green eyes, what they symbolized, was never truly replaced or adequately reimagined. From the very beginning, Lily's green eyes are established as something special. They're not just a feature, they are a recurring motif. In Philosopher's Stone, when Harry looks into the mirror of Erist, Dumbledore later tells him, "Your mother died to save you." If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. The physical reminder of Lily's presence, her very eyes, lives on in Harry. It's a living echo of that love. As Harry learns more about his parents through others, that detail keeps surfacing. Mrs. Figg, the eccentric neighbour who is revealed to be a squib, says upon seeing him, "Those eyes." just like your mother's. Remus Lupin, upon first meeting Harry in Prisoner of Azkaban, is stunned. "You look so like your father, Wincham, except your eyes. You've got your mother's eyes." This emotional refrain is most powerfully echoed by Severus Snape. In Deathly Hallows, during his final moments, Snape, mortally wounded, uses the last of his strength to look into Harry's eyes. "Look at me," he says, not because he wants to see Harry, but because he wants to see Lily. It's one of the most intimate and heartbreaking moments in the entire saga. When Harry later views Snape's memories in the Pensieve, the impact of that sentence is magnified 100-fold. Snape's lifelong love for Lily is raw, pure, and unresolved. In those final seconds, he sees her again, through Harry's green eyes. But for those who only watched the films, much of this symbolism loses its visual connection. Daniel Radcliffe's eyes are a clear and striking blue. Beautiful, no doubt, but not the green of Lily Evans described in the books. The cinematic adaptation keeps the dialogue intact. Characters continue to comment on Harry's eyes, including Snape's final words, but for the careful viewer, the effect is dissonant. Snape asks to look at Lily one last time, but he looks into a pair of eyes that don't match the description that has been repeated again and again. The emotional punctuation of that scene is slightly dulled because the audience doesn't see what the characters see. To be fair, the filmmakers did attempt to honour Rowling's vision. Daniel Radcliffe tried wearing green contact lenses during the shooting of Sorcerer's Stone 2001, but suffered a painful allergic reaction. Director Chris Columbus, prioritising the young actor's comfort and health, made the decision to proceed with Radcliffe's natural eye colour. In interviews, Columbus mentioned, "We tried, but Dan's eyes swelled up so badly. We realised very quickly this wasn't going to work." They briefly considered casting another actor, but Rowling herself advised against it, stressing that performance and emotional depth mattered more than perfect physical resemblance. Still, fans never forgot. Across countless forums and interviews, the absence of Harry's green eyes remained a point of conversation and regret. "Why did they keep referencing it if they weren't going to show it?" asked one fan in a 2011 Reddit thread. Another fan wrote, "It might seem small, but those eyes were Lily. That's how Snape could see her one last time." This wasn't just about iris colour, it was about what that detail meant in the universe of Harry Potter. Rowling's deliberate repetition of the phrase served as narrative glue. Each time a character invoked Lily's eyes, readers were reminded of the depth of her sacrifice. They were reminded that Harry was not just the boy who lived, but a living testament to the love that conquered death. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry visits the Department of Mysteries, and the veil flutters with whispers from the beyond, it's not his scar or his fame that gives him strength. It's the bond of love, of family. That bond is so often visually and emotionally tied to the inheritance of those eyes. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry returns from the graveyard with Cedric's body and his mother's echo reaches out to protect him during the Priori Incantatem moment, we once again think of her. "Hold on, Harry," she says. "Hold on for your father, me, and Cedric." That green-eyed connection, that living essence, is what Voldemort could never understand, the unbreakable line between mother and son. Voldemort, too, is obsessed with bloodlines and ancestry. The irony, of course, is that the very blood he takes to resurrect himself, Harry's, contains the magic of Lily's protection. It lives on not just metaphorically, but literally. Her blood runs through him, her eyes, her final act of love, guard her son. The significance of Harry's green eyes is layered in mythology, character, and prophecy. In the final confrontation, in Deathly Hallows, when Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to sacrifice himself, he is thinking of his parents. I'm about to die, he whispers to the resurrection stone. Lily appears to him, hand outstretched. You've been so brave, she says. He sees her, or rather through her, in himself. The colour of her eyes, her voice, her love, they are all there in him. That detail, although absent in the films, remains a powerful thread through the novels. Snape's love for Lily is anchored in her eyes. In The Prince's Tale, we witness their first meeting at Spinner's End. Young Severus, awkward and shy, watches Lily as she conjures a petal in the air. "You're a witch," he says, marvelling. Years later, even after she marries James and he joins Voldemort, her eyes haunt him. In Dumbledore's office, when the headmaster tells Snape to protect Harry, Snape protests, "You know how and why she died. Make sure it was not in vain." Dumbledore asks, "If you truly loved her?" And Snape's response is a spell. Always. The weight of that moment rests on the bond between them, symbolized by Harry's eyes. It's not just Snape. When Sirius sees Harry for the first time in Azkaban, there is grief behind his smile. He sees James in Harry's face, but the eyes remind him of Lily. Lupin, too, hesitates when he sees Harry, because he is looking into the eyes of his best friend's wife. Even Aunt Petunia in Order of the Phoenix cannot bear to look directly at him when reminded of Lily. "You didn't just lose a sister," Dumbledore tells her. "You lost someone who gave her life to save a boy." That boy with those haunting green eyes becomes a reminder of all that Petunia buried. In the books, Lily's green eyes are a visual and emotional touchstone. Every character who loved her responds to Harry not just as the boy who lived, but as the boy who looks. They see her in him. The resonance of that is irreplaceable. That's why, for book readers, the absence of green eyes in the films feels like a wound that never quite closed. It's a missed opportunity to deepen the emotional language of cinema. In a medium where visual storytelling reigns, small details can carry great emotional weight. Just as Frodo's blue eyes in The Lord of the Rings deepen his innocence, or Bruce Wayne's haunted gaze reflects his trauma, Harry's green eyes should have been a narrative anchor. Imagine how different those scenes might have felt. Snape's last breath, Lily's ghost in the forest, Sirius's warm embrace. If those emerald eyes had stared back, would the audience have cried harder? Would they have felt the love more intensely? Perhaps. There's a kind of magic in details, especially in a story where love is the most powerful force. Harry's green eyes weren't just a nod to genetics, they were the vessel through which Lily's love shone. In a series where symbols matter, wands choosing their owners, patronuses revealing the heart, scars marking destinies. The colour of a boy's eyes was never a small thing. It was everything. Though the films did justice to much of Rowling's emotional tapestry, this one thread was left frayed. The words remained, but the image was missing. And for many fans, that disconnect remains a small heartbreak, because for Harry Potter, the orphan, the hero, the son, the most powerful magic wasn't in a spell book. It was in the green eyes he inherited, and the love that lived behind them. Number 20. Why Hermione erased her parents' memories. Of all the spells cast during the war against Voldemort, perhaps none was as quietly devastating as the one Hermione Granger performed in the opening scene of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Part 1. In the dim light of her parents' sitting room, she raised her wand and whispered the incantation, "Obliviate." With that, her mother and father, Wendell and Monica Wilkins, as they now believed themselves to be, forgot they ever had a daughter. The spell was clean, powerful, and final. Yet behind that simple motion lay a storm of anguish, love, and calculated sacrifice that few understood fully. The film gives us only a brief glimpse of this act, a haunting shot of Hermione fading from the family photographs, her absence swallowing years of joy and memory. There are no tears, no words, no goodbyes. Just silence. But the book tells a different, deeper story. In Chapter 6 of The Deathly Hallows, Hermione reveals to Harry and Ron, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia, which they now have." The cold clarity of her words masks the emotional devastation behind them. Hermione didn't simply erase herself from their minds, she rewrote their entire lives. Every Sunday morning breakfast, every Christmas morning surprise, every school recital, every tearful bedtime story. Gone. Not just gone, but replaced. She didn't want her parents to simply forget her, she wanted them safe. And safety, in the Wizarding War, meant severing ties completely. She instilled in them a desire to leave Britain altogether, to settle in Australia, far from the reach of Death Eaters. That was the brilliance and cruelty of the spell. They wouldn't just forget her, they'd forget they ever wanted to know her. What kind of person chooses to be forgotten by the people who love her most? Hermione Granger was only 17, but she carried the burden of a woman thrice her age. The Ministry had fallen, Voldemort's power was rising, Muggle-borns like her were being hunted. She knew that Death Eaters wouldn't hesitate to target her parents to get to her. Torture, interrogation, murder, all were real possibilities. Hermione couldn't protect them with shields or charms. She had to remove herself from their lives entirely. She had to make them forget they were ever vulnerable. But no spell is as precise as the caster's pain. There's something brutal about Hermione's decision, something profoundly lonely. She didn't tell Harry and Ron what she had done until after it was done. She didn't seek comfort, didn't ask for help. Her strength was quiet, solitary. That night, as her parents packed their bags for Australia, thinking only of beaches and sun, their daughter stood in the shadows, invisible to them for the first time. And she wept. J.K. Rowling never describes that moment directly, but the weight of it lingers in Hermione's actions throughout the book. The pain is etched in her voice, in her obsessive need to plan, to control, to save. "It's all well thought out," she tells the boys, speaking of their journey. But it's clear that her careful preparation is also a coping mechanism, a way to keep from collapsing under the loss she's already endured. Her sacrifice is immense. She walks into war alone, without the anchor of family, in stark contrast to Harry, who draws strength from the memory of his parents, and Ron, who fights with the knowledge that his entire family stands behind him. Hermione is utterly alone in the world. Her greatest source of love and comfort is gone, not by death or accident, but by her own hand. That isolation shapes her. It hardens her, it makes her relentless in her pursuit of justice. She fights not just for Harry or for the cause, but to make her parents' unknowing sacrifice worth something. Imagine for a moment the morning after the spell. The Wilkinses wake up in their home, eager to begin their new life. They see brochures for Sydney's suitcases by the door, passports stamped. But they feel no sorrow, no emptiness. They have no sense that someone is missing from their lives. That absence is Hermione's agony and her triumph. The spell worked perfectly, and that's what makes it so tragic. The ethics of such a spell are murky. Hermione didn't ask for consent, she didn't warn them, she decided unilaterally to erase herself from their lives. Was it right? Was it fair? Perhaps not, but it was necessary. War forces impossible choices. This was hers. She gave up the right to be loved so that the people she loved could live. And in doing so, she became something more than a student, more than a friend. She became a protector, a warrior. The Obliviate spell in most cases is used casually, but a flick of the wand to erase a muggle's memory of something magical. Gilderoy Lockhart uses it arrogantly, recklessly, with disastrous consequences, but Hermione wields it with care, precision, and heartbreak. It's not a spell in her hands, it's an act of love, wrapped in pain. And unlike most memory charms, which are temporary or flawed, hers is perfect. Her parents don't recover on their own. The spell holds until she lifts it. What makes her decision even more harrowing is that she does not know if she will survive to undo it. When she casts the spell, she is planning for a war that might end with her death. She accepts that she may never see her parents again, that they may live the rest of their lives thinking they are childless. And still, she does it. That's courage in its rawest form, to give up everything for a future you might not live to see. Throughout the Deathly Hallows, we see glimpses of Hermione's suffering, but it's often understated. She breaks down after Ron leaves, lashes out when plans fall apart, clings to logic when hope is scarce. But never once does she express regret about what she did to her parents, not because she feels no pain, but because she knows it was the right thing. She carries that burden with quiet dignity, like a soldier who doesn't speak of the wounds she endured. Fans often debate the differences between the books and the films, but few omissions are as glaring as this one. The movie gives us a visual cue, Hermione disappearing from the photos, but never explains the emotional and magical depth of what she has done. There's no discussion of the new identities she implanted, no sense of the lifelong implications. The viewer sees the result, but not the reasoning, the love, the heartbreak. And it is love, more than anything, that defines Hermione's action. Not just love for her parents, but love for the world she is trying to save. She believes in a future free from tyranny, free from fear, a future where she can sit beside her parents again, perhaps in a sunlit kitchen, telling them the truth and hoping they will understand. That future is uncertain, but worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. In a way, Hermione's memory spell is a mirror of the Horcruxes. Voldemort splits his soul to escape death. Hermione splits her heart to preserve life. Both acts are irreversible in their own way. Both leave scars. But while Voldemort's actions are born of fear and selfishness, Hermione's are born of love and courage. That contrast is one of the most powerful themes in the series. At the end of the war, Hermione does track her parents down. She finds them in Australia and restores their memories. We are told this only in interviews and outside material. The books end before we see the reunion. But we can imagine it. The hesitation in her voice, the tears. The moment when her mother blinks, remembers, and embraces her. The moment when her father whispers her name. Hermione! A word thought lost, returned. It is easy to forget that Hermione, the brilliant witch, the fighter, the friend, the strategist, is also a daughter. That behind the intellect and the bravery is a young woman who made the most human of sacrifices. She gave up love for the sake of love. She took away her parents' child so that they could live to see another day. She chose to hurt herself so they wouldn't have to. And that choice, quiet, painful, and unseen by most, might be the most heroic act in the entire series. Not because it involved spells or duels or death, but because it involved unbearable love and selflessness. In a war full of flash and fire, Hermione's spell was a whisper, but it echoes still louder than thunder. Number 21, How Fred Weasley Really Died. The battle raged on within the crumbling halls of Hogwarts. The air was thick with smoke and magic, the ground trembling beneath the weight of a war that tore through every stone and soul. And in the midst of that chaos, one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire story of Harry Potter unfolded, a moment that, in the film, slipped past too quickly, too quietly. The death of Fred Weasley was not just another casualty in the fight against Voldemort. It was a moment of soul-crushing loss, a tragedy that broke the hearts of characters and readers alike. Fred's death in the book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was given the weight it deserved. It happened suddenly, violently, in the middle of a brief moment of joy. The twins, Fred and George, had always been the heart of levity in the series. They brought laughter where there was darkness, mischief where there was fear. They were, for so many, the reminder that even in the darkest times, laughter could exist. And so it was cruelly fitting, painfully poetic, that Fred's last moment came just as he was laughing. Fred was standing with his brother Percy, who had only recently reconciled with the family after years of estrangement. That moment in itself was powerful. Percy, once loyal only to the ministry, had seen the truth, cast aside his pride, and returned to fight alongside his family. Fred and Percy were fighting together, side by side, on the same side at last. As J.K. Rowling wrote, and Percy was shaking his brother, and Ron was kneeling beside them, and Fred's eyes stared without seeing, the ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. That quote captures everything: the finality, the shock, the unbearable irony of it all. Fred, whose life had been defined by laughter, had died mid-laugh. It was as if the war had found its most poignant target, not just another soldier, not just another fighter, but someone who represented life and humor, someone who could make others forget, if only briefly, that they were in a world filled with darkness. The explosion that killed Fred came during a battle in one of the castle's corridors. Death Eaters and defenders of Hogwarts were locked in furious combat. The very walls of the school shook with the force of spells and destruction. The specifics of the spell that took Fred's life are never detailed. It was a sudden blast, perhaps a curse gone wild, or something thrown in blind hatred. But it hit Fred full on, killing him instantly and leaving the survivors stunned, destroyed in a different way. What made it worse was Percy's reaction. For all his arrogance, his mistakes, Percy was still a brother. And when he realized what had happened, he did not run. He did not crumble. He remained at Fred's side, refusing to believe what his eyes told him. Percy, the rule-bound, emotion-avoiding bureaucrat, broke in that moment. He screamed. He shook Fred's body. He tried to shield him, even though it was too late. The pain of it poured from the page. George, Fred's twin, is absent from that immediate moment, and yet his absence is felt in a different way, as a shadow. Because the death of a twin is not the same as the death of a sibling. For George, Fred was not just a brother, he was a half of himself. They had finished each other's sentences since they could speak. They had built a life together, a shop, a brand, a legacy of humor and rebellion. When Fred died, something in George was forever broken. The film adaptation, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, chose a more subdued path. Fred's death is shown briefly, almost in passing. We see his body lying still in the Great Hall, surrounded by grieving family members, but the moment is never fully explored. There is no explosion, no dramatic scene with Percy, no final laugh frozen on Fred's face. It's a blink-and-you-miss-it moment, and for many fans, it felt like a disservice to the character and to the readers who had loved him. In omitting the depth of Fred's death, the film lost something essential. The weight of reconciliation between Percy and Fred, the bitter irony of Fred's last laugh, and the emotional devastation it brought. All of it was gone. What was left was just a body, lying among others. But Fred Weasley was not just another name on the list of the fallen. He was the boy who gave Umbridge hell. He was the inventor of skiving snack boxes. He was the twin who helped bring down the reign of fear with a well-timed firework. One of the most haunting aspects of the book's description is how everyone reacts to Fred's death. Ron, the younger brother who had always looked up to the twins, is crushed. He kneels beside Fred, lost in grief, while Hermione watches in horror. Percy is inconsolable. Even in a war filled with death, Fred's loss feels like a singular blow, like the world itself had gone silent for a moment. The narrative structure of the book makes Fred's death stand out more starkly because it comes during a rare moment of hope. Fred and Percy were making jokes again. They were laughing together. It was a tiny reprieve, a second of light in the midst of ruin. And then, obliteration. Rowling doesn't describe the spell, but she doesn't have to. The contrast between joy and death says more than any graphic detail ever could. It's also worth noting that Rowling herself has spoken about Fred's death. In interviews, she has admitted that killing Fred was one of the hardest choices she made while writing the series. She cried while writing it, and fans have cried reading it, because it felt so unjust, so random, so final. In a war filled with villains, it was the one who spread joy who was struck down. George's pain afterward is left mostly unsaid, but it is there in the silences, in how he continues on without Fred, in how he returns to the joke shop they built, alone. It is said that George could never produce a Patronus again, that his happiest memories had all included Fred. This isn't from the main text, but it's widely accepted as canon, shared by Rowling and deeply felt by fans. What makes Fred's death so cruel is its timing. He had his whole life ahead of him. He had plans. He had jokes yet to tell, inventions yet to create, a future that was just beginning. In war, death does not wait for good timing. It does not spare the joyful or the beloved. And in that way, Fred's death is a symbol of everything that war destroys. Not just people, but laughter, family, connection. It's also symbolic that Fred dies in Hogwarts, the place he once fled, in a blaze of rebellion. He and George had made their grand escape in Order of the Phoenix, defying Umbridge and flying into the night. That moment was one of pure triumph. But now, in the same school, in the same corridors, Fred lay dead. Hogwarts gave him a stage for his rebellion and a grave for his courage. The relationship between Fred and Percy adds another layer. Percy had been blind to the corruption of the ministry, blind to the suffering of his own family. And when he finally saw the truth, it was already too late to save Fred. But he fought beside him anyway, made him laugh, and was there when he died. That sliver of redemption does not soften the tragedy, it sharpens it. Percy got his brother back for one final moment, only to lose him forever.
And what of Molly and Arthur? We never fully see their reaction in the book, but the image is enough. Their son, so full of life, is gone. The Weasleys had already lost so much, they had given everything to the cause. And now they had paid the ultimate price. A mother's pain is in every breath Molly takes after that, and Arthur's silence says what words cannot.
Fred's death was not the end of the war, but it was a moment that made readers pause. It reminded us what was at stake. Not just lives, but light. Not just victory, but the people who make the victory worth having. Fred was a casualty of war, yes, but he was also a symbol of all that was good and fun and irreverent. He died protecting what he loved, fighting alongside family, laughing till the end. When fans speak of deaths in the series, they often mention Sirius, Dumbledore, or Snape. But Fred's death, in its simplicity and its cruelty, remains one of the most devastating, not because he was a hero with a dark past or a secret legacy, but because he was a brother, a friend, a spark. And in war, when the sparks go out, the world grows darker still. His legacy lives on, not just in George, who somehow finds the strength to continue, but in every joke, every prank, every memory left behind. The joke shop becomes a tribute, a shrine to what Fred stood for. And though he is gone, his laugh echoes through those walls as if daring the world to find joy again. So, when we speak of Fred Weasley, let us not reduce him to a still body in a film scene barely shown. Let us remember him as he was in the book, in full motion, cracking jokes, fighting with fire, dying with laughter. A life cut short, yes, but a life that burned brightly to the very end. Number 22. Why Dementors Attacked in the Muggle World. The summer air in Little Whinging had never felt so oppressive. It was a dull, sticky August evening when the unthinkable happened. 2 Dementors gliding silently down a Muggle alley to attack a 15-year-old boy and his cousin. That boy was Harry Potter, and that evening changed everything. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 1, Dudley Demented, we witness a surreal encounter. Dementors, the foulest creatures known to wizard kind, appeared not in a dark corridor of Azkaban, not on the grounds of Hogwarts, but in a quiet, suburban alleyway in the middle of the Muggle world. Their sudden emergence raises an unsettling question. Why would creatures loyal to the Ministry of Magic attack Harry Potter in a place so far removed from their usual haunts? Harry had been arguing with his cousin Dudley, who had been bullying him as usual. It was an ordinary teenage spat until everything changed. Then, as he lay flat on the ground, he felt something wet and sticky on his face. Blood. Dudley's nose must have hit him when he fell. But that was nothing compared to what followed. A chill that not even the summer evening could dispel was stealing over the street. He turned his head, cold, the kind of cold that went through your bones. The Dementors struck with terrifying force. One seized Harry, the other moved toward Dudley. In that moment, Harry, though still underage and forbidden to use magic outside school, had no choice but to draw his wand and cast the Patronus charm, Expecto Patronum. A silver stag exploded from the end of his wand, galloping toward the creatures, scattering them. He had saved both himself and his cousin, but at what cost? What makes this incident truly strange is that Dementors should never have been there. These were not rogue creatures. They were still, at that point in the timeline, under the employ and control of the Ministry of Magic. Which begs the obvious question: who sent them? In the immediate aftermath, Harry is blamed, not praised. He receives a letter from Mafalda Hopkirk at the Ministry, stating coldly, "Dear Mr. Potter, we have received intelligence that you performed the Patronus charm at 23 minutes past 9 this evening. As you are aware, underage wizards are not permitted to perform magic outside school." The punishment? Immediate expulsion from Hogwarts. This reaction seems absurd until one understands the deeper political context. At the time, the Ministry of Magic, under the leadership of Cornelius Fudge, was in denial. Denial of Voldemort's return, denial of the rising threat, and most of all, denial of Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore's truth. Discrediting Harry became a top priority. The attack provided the perfect excuse. What the book reveals, and what the film omits, is the true architect of the ambush, Dolores Jane Umbridge. Sweet-voiced, pink-clad, and more sinister than any Death Eater, Umbridge was working directly under the orders of Fudge. Later in the book, during a confrontation at Hogwarts, she confesses with terrifying pride, Yes, it was I who sent the Dementors." She admits to doing so without official ministry sanction, acting alone, but knowing full well the ministry would stand by her if the plan succeeded. Her motive? to provoke Harry into using magic illegally, thereby providing the Ministry with a pretext to expel him and damage his credibility. If Harry was seen as unstable, reckless, and disobedient, it would be easier for the wizarding public to dismiss his claims about Voldemort. It was a political assassination masked as law enforcement. The plan was clever. Dementors are not just soul-sucking creatures, they are psychological weapons. They make their victims relive their worst memories, drain them of hope, of joy, of light. For Harry, whose childhood had been filled with pain, they were devastating. As he once told Professor Lupin, "I can hear my mum screaming when they come near." Umbridge counted on Harry being so overwhelmed by fear or trauma that he would be unable to defend himself, and thus the Ministry could swoop in and arrest him. But Harry was stronger than they expected. His training with Lupin in Prisoner of Azkaban paid off. He managed to cast a full Patronus and repel both Dementors. More impressively, he saved Dudley as well, a boy who had never done him any kindness. Even in the face of darkness, Harry remained true to himself. Despite his bravery, the Ministry doubled down. They called a full hearing for underage magic, an unprecedented response. Dumbledore described it as a full criminal trial for a simple case of underage magic in self-defense, revealing how desperate the Ministry was to make an example of Harry. The hearing itself, held in Courtroom 10 of the Ministry, was a grim spectacle. Fudge, flanked by Umbridge and other high-ranking officials, acted more like a prosecutor than a neutral arbiter. He tried to discredit Harry's character, question his honesty, and even dismiss the witness testimony of Arabella Figg, a squib and neighbour who had seen the Dementors. Arabella's testimony was crucial. They were big and wearing cloaks. They didn't breathe, she said. Fudge attempted to undermine her, asking if she really knew what Dementors look like. Dumbledore intervened, reminding Fudge that a squib is perfectly capable of recognizing magical beings. The courtroom drama only emphasized how far the Ministry had strayed from justice. In the end, the truth, and Dumbledore's calm authority, prevailed. Harry was cleared of all charges. But the damage was done. The Ministry's willingness to manipulate the truth and endanger a child's life proved just how broken the system had become. The implications of Umbridge's actions are staggering. She unleashed soul-sucking creatures in a Muggle neighborhood, risking exposure of the wizarding world, all to silence a 15-year-old boy. The magical world's statute of secrecy, its most sacred law, was nearly shattered. But the Ministry didn't care. Power mattered more than principles. What's even more horrifying is that Umbridge showed no remorse. She later becomes the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts, where she terrorizes students, punishes them cruelly, and uses quills that carve words into their skin. When Harry confronts her about the Dementors, she merely smirks. She had already won that battle in her mind. This plot detail is conspicuously absent from the film adaptation. In the movie, the attack by the Dementors is portrayed as random, and the Ministry's actions seem bureaucratic, not malicious. Viewers unfamiliar with the book miss the sinister undercurrent. The Ministry had weaponized Dementors. Rowling's narrative is deeper and darker than the films allow. The attack in Little Whinging is not an isolated event. It is the beginning of a campaign to destroy Harry's credibility. It marks the moment when the Ministry stops being a force for good and becomes complicit in evil. Harry's experience after the attack also highlights his growing isolation. Even within the wizarding world, many begin to doubt him. The Daily Prophet runs smear articles. Students whisper behind his back. "The Ministry started a campaign against me," he tells Sirius bitterly. "They want everyone to think I'm lying." The Dementor attack was merely the first salvo. It's worth noting that Dementors are not truly loyal to anyone. They follow whoever feeds their hunger. As Lupin once said, they feed on every good feeling, every happy memory. You are left with nothing but the worst experiences of your life. They are dangerous because they can be manipulated. Umbridge's use of them is the wizarding equivalent of unleashing a biological weapon. This event is one of many turning points in Order of the Phoenix, but it's also a microcosm of a larger theme, the corruption of institutions. The ministry, created to protect, becomes an enemy. Rules meant to ensure safety are used to punish. Truth becomes treason, and a teenage boy must fight alone against the lies. Harry's resilience shines through all of this. He refuses to be silenced. He fights not just with wands, but with truth, loyalty, and the courage to stand alone. "I don't care," he tells Dumbledore. "I've seen him. I've fought him." Even when the world turns against him, he holds fast to what he knows is right. The attack on Harry and Dudley was not an accident. It was a calculated move by a woman who cloaked tyranny in kittens and lace. But her plan failed, not because the system worked, but because one boy refused to be broken. And that is what makes Harry Potter a hero, not just his ability to cast powerful spells, but his refusal to surrender to fear, lies, or injustice. The Dementors came for him cloaked in darkness and despair. But he stood his ground. And when the silver stag burst from his wand, it wasn't just magic. It was hope. It was defiance. It was the beginning of the fight for the truth.
Number 23. How Snape Found Harry in the Forest.
In the cold silence of the Forest of Dean, with only frost-covered leaves whispering beneath Harry's boots, a silver light appeared, faint at first, but growing. A doe, ethereal, familiar. She stood still, radiant and silent, then turned, guiding Harry toward a frozen pond where the sword of Gryffindor lay beneath the ice. In Deathly Hallows Part 1, the moment passed like a dream, but the real story, how this happened, why it happened, and who was behind it, is far richer than the film dares to show. This is not merely a tale of coincidence. It's one of promises, sacrifice, and a love that never died. In the book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling gifts us a clearer picture. The silver doe didn't appear out of thin air. She was conjured. Not by Dumbledore, though she might have seemed angelic enough. Not by Lily, though she wore her form. She was sent by Severus Snape, still cloaked in secrecy, still playing both sides, and yet at that moment risking everything for the son of the woman he once loved. How did he know Harry was there, of all places? The Forest of Dean isn't exactly on a Marauders map. It's not mentioned in Daily Prophet headlines or whispered in the corridors of Hogwarts. Harry and Hermione at that point were in hiding, moving constantly, avoiding detection by both Snatchers and Death Eaters. No spells, no charms connected them to anyone. No one, not even Ron, after he left, knew where they had gone. So how? The answer lies in a detail omitted by the film, but revealed with quiet precision in the book's final chapters. In Chapter 33, The Prince's Tale, Harry sees Snape's memories inside the pensieve. It is here, buried beneath layers of pain and duty, that the truth unfolds. After Dumbledore's death, his portrait hung in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, a feature common to all past headmasters. But Dumbledore wasn't done guiding events. Even in death, his wisdom stretched beyond the grave, reaching through canvas and oil. Snape, reluctantly obeying Dumbledore's instructions, consulted the portrait. "My word, Severus, that wand was never yours," the painted Dumbledore remarked, guiding him as if he were still alive. But more importantly, at one point, the portrait tells Snape the general location of Harry and Hermione. Not precise coordinates, but enough. "They are in the Forest of Dean," Dumbledore's painted voice whispered. That was all Snape needed. He could find them. He had to. What Snape did next was reckless, bold, and so subtle it could have gone unnoticed forever. He didn't apparate to them directly, didn't approach them with wand raised or robes billowing. He didn't seek glory or gratitude. Instead, he sent a Patronus, a silent, glowing fragment of his soul. And not just any Patronus, a doe. The same animal that had belonged to Lily Potter, the only woman he ever loved. It was no accident. "After all this time?" Dumbledore had once asked, his voice barely more than breath. "Always," Snape had replied. That single word, that quiet vow, echoed in the silver hooves of the doe as she led Harry to the sword beneath the ice. But why the sword? That too needs context. The sword of Gryffindor, once in Dumbledore's possession, had been left to Harry in his will, but the Ministry seized it, arguing it wasn't Dumbledore's to give. Later, it was revealed that the true sword had been hidden, while a fake remained behind glass. Why? Because the real sword could destroy Horcruxes. It had absorbed basilisk venom in the Chamber of Secrets, making it one of the few weapons capable of ending Voldemort's twisted immortality. Dumbledore knew that Harry would need it. But he also knew Harry would not easily accept it if handed directly, especially not from Snape. That's why the delivery had to be delicate, covert. In the memory, Snape asks, "Would it not be more prudent to place the sword in the boy's possession directly?" But Dumbledore objects. If he does not discover the sword himself, he may not accept it. So Snape must plant it, cleverly, silently. The pond, the doe, the cold, each part of a puzzle constructed to guide, not to gift. So in the freezing woods, guided by a being he could not identify, Harry followed. The sword glinted beneath the surface of an icy pool, distant and unreachable. The scene feels magical, even divine. But in reality, it was the result of cunning, timing, and an invisible promise. Snape had placed it there, alone, in secret, and he had conjured the Patronus to guide Harry, hoping it would be enough. This act, simple as it may seem, is monumental. Snape was being hunted himself. He was headmaster now, yes, but his life was one of constant peril. Voldemort trusted him only because he had murdered Dumbledore. The Order doubted him because they believed the same. No one knew he was working for Harry's survival. No one except a portrait. There is a tragic poetry to the image of Snape, standing in the shadows of the forest, his breath freezing in the air, eyes flickering with uncertainty as the silver doe vanished into the trees. He couldn't watch Harry retrieve the sword. He couldn't help him further. The Patronus was his only voice, his only confession. He risked everything, not for thanks, not for redemption, but because he had sworn. To understand the emotional weight of that moment, we return again to the pensive. When Snape watches over Harry, even as he hates him for his resemblance to James, we see the aching duality of a man tormented by love and loyalty. "You have your mother's eyes," people always said. To Snape, those eyes were a constant reminder of the life he could never have. And yet, he protected Harry with more devotion than most. He watched over the trio's journey from a distance, quietly. In one memory, he is shown delivering the sword to the forest, wrapping it in spells to prevent just anyone from taking it. That is canon. That is truth. He did not expect gratitude. He did not expect understanding. He did not even expect success. Only duty. The movie skips all this. In part 1, Harry sees the doe and follows. There is no explanation, no hint that it came from Snape. Viewers unfamiliar with the books are left wondering, was it Dumbledore? Was it Lily? Was it magic itself? The moment loses its purpose. It becomes mystical instead of meaningful. That's a shame. Because in the book, that moment is a revelation, not for Harry, who still doesn't know the Patronus's source, but for us, the readers, the witnesses. We are allowed to see behind the veil, to understand that this man, cruel, complex, and controversial, just risked his life to fulfill a dying man's plan, not for glory, but because he once loved a girl with red hair and a kind heart. The narrative beauty lies in contrast. In life, Snape could never win Lily's heart. In death, he tried to save the last piece of her that remained. The boy, the sword, the Patronus, each a symbol of love and regret. The irony is thick. Snape, who once called Lily a mudblood, became her child's silent guardian. He, who despised James, protected James's son. He, who lived in shadows, became the guiding light, literally in the form of that Patronus. When Harry dives into the pond, nearly drowns, and is saved by Ron, the sword finally reaches its true purpose. And though Snape never knew the outcome, he had done his part. He had followed the plan. He had lived the lie, all for a boy who would never thank him. But we do. As readers, we come to that moment with hindsight, aching hearts and new understanding. We see the doe. We remember the word, always. And we know. He never stopped loving her. He never stopped protecting her son. Even when no one was watching, in that quiet glade, where only frost and memory remain, Severus Snape's greatest act was never seen by those it saved. And perhaps that was the point. Some heroes don't wear medals, some don't even get remembered, but their light still guides us through the dark. And the doe? She still walks the forest of Dean, still glowing, still silent, still watching. Number 24. Why Hermione fought for elf rights. In her 4th year at Hogwarts, Hermione Granger did something no one expected. In a world filled with dragons, curses, and secret plots, she looked away from the spectacle and focused on something small, hidden, and largely ignored, the plight of the house elves. It was a moment that defined her character more than any spell she had ever cast. Most people, including her closest friends, laughed off her concern. But Hermione wasn't joking. She saw injustice, and where others shrugged, she stood up. It all began at the Quidditch World Cup, a glittering celebration of magical sport that quickly descended into chaos. Amid the fireworks and flying broomsticks, a house elf named Winky was found holding a wand, Harry Potter's wand, and was immediately accused of conjuring the Dark Mark. Although Winky was terrified and clearly innocent, she was dismissed on the spot by her master, Barty Crouch, Sr. Winky was trembling from head to foot. The book reads, her ears drooped and her eyes were brimming with tears. Goff, Chapter 9. That scene left an impression on Hermione so deep it ignited a fire in her she couldn't ignore. The magical community treated house elves as property. Even kind-hearted wizards like Dumbledore accepted that house elves were unpaid, bound to service, and often punished if they disobeyed. For Hermione, who came from a Muggle background, where slavery had long been abolished and human rights were a given, this revelation was not only shocking, it was unacceptable. Her shock quickly turned into indignation. "You know house elves get a very raw deal," she declared. "It's slavery, that's what it is." Goef, Chapter 14. This wasn't just a passing outrage. Hermione began asking questions, uncomfortable questions. Why did Hogwarts, a prestigious school known for enlightenment and learning, keep house elves working in its kitchens without pay or recognition? Why did no one speak for them? Even her friends Harry and Ron were skeptical. Ron, ever the product of his upbringing, told her, "They like it, Hermione. They like being enslaved. Goethe, Chapter 14. That only made her more determined. The same way she attacked difficult spells and schoolwork, Hermione now applied her energy to activism. Within days, she founded SPEWSA, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, although in the original she calls it GAVNE, Гражданская ассоциация восстановления независимости эльфов. The name alone drew snickers, but Hermione didn't care. She created badges, wrote a charter, and began recruiting members, even if the only ones who joined were Harry, Ron, reluctantly, and Neville. "I'm going to keep trying to get them out of the kitchens," she said fiercely. "I'm going to start sending them clothes." Goethe, Chapter 21. She even knitted hats and socks, hiding them under bits of parchment in Gryffindor Tower, hoping the elves would pick them up and be freed. The irony, of course, was that the elves found this offensive. Dobby, the only elf who appreciated her efforts, explained that the others viewed the clothing as a trick. "They finds it insulting, miss," he told her gently. "They is not liking clothes, miss." Goethe, Chapter 21. But Hermione refused to back down. Even when her cause seemed hopeless, she clung to it. What's fascinating about this subplot, which was entirely cut from the films, is how it reveals Hermione's moral compass. She wasn't fighting for attention or glory. She wasn't chasing danger or dark wizards. She was advocating for voiceless creatures most wizards didn't think twice about. That took more bravery than people realized. Standing against Voldemort was terrifying, but it was also obvious. This was quiet resistance. It was deeply political, emotional, and complicated. Her crusade also served as a mirror to the wizarding world itself. The treatment of house elves exposed deep-rooted inequalities and the casual cruelty embedded in magical society. It questioned the ethics of institutions, even beloved ones like Hogwarts. How could a society claim to be moral while allowing sentient beings to be bound into servitude? These were the kinds of questions that only someone like Hermione, logical, empathetic, and idealistic, would dare to ask. Her passion also created tension. Ron, constantly dismissive of her efforts, mocked SPEW Harry, though kinder, didn't fully grasp the significance. "They don't want to be free," he told her, echoing the common sentiment. Hermione snapped back, "Because they've been brainwashed." Goethe, Chapter 21. She understood that decades, even centuries of oppression could make creatures believe they deserved their chains. That was perhaps the most tragic part. Dobby's presence added depth to her movement. As a free elf working at Hogwarts for wages, a rare arrangement, he was living proof that change was possible. Hermione adored him for it. She asked about his pay, his conditions, his freedom, and was delighted that he had asked for time off and a wage. It was the model she envisioned for others. "Dobby is a free elf, and Dobby is getting paid," he said, proudly. Goethe, Chapter 21. For Hermione, that was a victory. The tragedy of Winky, on the other hand, reminded everyone that freedom wasn't always easy. After being dismissed, she spiraled into depression. "She's not getting over it," Dobby confided. "She's ashamed, miss. She's ashamed of being free." Goethe, Chapter 21. This crushed Hermione. She had hoped that once freed, house elves would rejoice. But reality was more complex. Winky's sorrow showed that liberation without support could feel like punishment. Still, Hermione refused to abandon her ideals. The easy thing would have been to accept defeat, laugh it off, and move on to more glamorous battles. But she didn't. She continued wearing her SPEW badge. She kept knitting hats. She kept reminding others, loudly, persistently, that magic didn't make oppression acceptable. Her cause didn't make headlines. It didn't save lives, but it mattered. It was a quiet battle for dignity. Her activism wasn't perfect, She didn't always understand the culture or psychology of house elves. She imposed her views without fully grasping theirs. But that's what made her real. Activism is messy. It involves mistakes, frustration, and criticism. Hermione was learning in real time. And in doing so, she modeled the kind of ethical growth that few characters in the series ever attempted. The films unfortunately erased all of this. They gave us the smart girl with the quick wand and sharper mind, but not the rebel with a bleeding heart. They omitted the activist, the idealist, the girl who dared to challenge her own society. That's a loss, because this subplot, the rise of SPEW, wasn't just about house elves. It was about power, complacency, and the courage to speak when no one wants to listen. In many ways, this side of Hermione prefigured the leader she would become in the fight against Voldemort. Her sense of justice wasn't reactionary. It wasn't born in battle. It was always there, rooted in principle. Long before she was fighting Death Eaters, she was fighting cultural apathy. She had the rare ability to see injustice, even when it wasn't dramatic or deadly, and to care about it deeply. Hermione's work with SPEW also had ripple effects. It influenced the way future generations might think about magical creatures. It gave Dobby an ally. It challenged Harry to consider things beyond his immediate world. It even made Ron uncomfortable, which was the first step toward him questioning his own assumptions. That's the power of someone like Hermione. She made people reconsider what they thought they knew. And perhaps most importantly, her efforts forced readers to confront the wizarding world's darker aspects. J.K. Rowling used Hermione's activism as a lens to examine institutional prejudice, the kind that hides behind tradition and comfort. It wasn't about villains in black cloaks. It was about ordinary wizards ignoring suffering because it didn't inconvenience them. Hermione saw that clearly, and she couldn't look away. In the end, SPEW was a small flame in a very dark world. It didn't succeed overnight. It didn't lead to a mass uprising of house elves. But it was a start, and sometimes that's enough. Hermione believed in fighting even when the fight seemed impossible. That made her a hero long before the war began. And it made her unforgettable, not just as a brilliant witch, but as a force for change. Number 25, who the Marauders were and how the map was made. In the dim corridors of Hogwarts, where the torches flicker with secrets and the stones echo with whispers of centuries past, a piece of parchment changed everything for Harry Potter. Folded, weathered, and enchanted beyond imagination, it was called the Marauders' Map. A map unlike any other, a map that breathed with the life of the castle, that revealed not just the walls and corridors, but the very souls who wandered them. Yet its origins were cloaked in silence, a mystery left untold in the films. To understand this artifact is to delve into the tangled loyalties and deep magic of four young men whose friendship burned bright, and then fell into ruin. The map came to Harry by accident, or perhaps by fate. In his third year, in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the Weasley twins, Fred and George, handed it to him as casually as they might a joke product from Zonko's. "We've decided your needs are greater than ours," Fred said, before tapping the map and uttering the words that would become legendary. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." But this map was more than a prankster's toy. It was the living memory of the Marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, four students who once ruled the Hogwarts Knights, exploring every corner, discovering every secret passage, defying every rule. They called themselves Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. These weren't just nicknames. They were identities forged in the fires of adolescence and sealed by a shared secret. Remus Lupin, Moony, was a werewolf, bitten as a child and cursed with monthly transformations. His friends, upon discovering this truth, didn't recoil. They didn't isolate him. Instead, they studied, researched, and eventually succeeded in becoming unregistered animagi, wizards who could transform into animals at will. Peter Pettigrew became Wormtail, a rat. Sirius Black became Padfoot, a shaggy black dog. James Potter, Harry's father, became Prongs, a majestic stag. This act of devotion wasn't easy. Becoming an animagus required talent, persistence, and nerve. But more than that, it required love. Lupin later reflected in the book with quiet awe. They didn't abandon me when they found out what I was. Instead, they did something truly remarkable. They became animagi to keep me company during my transformations. That kind of loyalty shaped not just their bond, but the very magic of the map. The Marauders map was created as a culmination of their exploits. They had roamed the castle by night, uncovered hidden rooms, tickled the pair in the painting to access the kitchens, and mapped every corner of the grounds. But Lupin's condition made secrecy essential. The Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade became his refuge, reached through a hidden tunnel beneath the Whomping Willow. The map helped them monitor everyone's positions, ensuring they were never caught. It was both a tool and a symbol of rebellion, of friendship, of control over their world. In crafting the map, they used advanced charms few adult wizards could master. Not only did it show every room and secret passage of Hogwarts, but it also identified every person by name. It could track moving feet through walls and floors. And more brilliantly still, it was enchanted to insult and protect itself from unauthorized users. When Severus Snape once tried to examine it, he was greeted with lines like, "Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business." A teenage joke, yes, but laced with the sting of their rivalry. Why did professors like Snape and Lupin recognize it so quickly? That is a clue buried deep in the subtext. Snape, being in school with the Marauders, had likely seen it before, or perhaps had it used against him. He hated James, feared Sirius, and loathed being the butt of their jokes. Lupin, on the other hand, knew it intimately. After all, he helped create it. When he confiscated the map from Harry in the book, he said gently but firmly, "I know this map. It's a very dangerous magical object." But he didn't destroy it. How could he? It was a ghost from a happier time, a relic of a bond now fractured by betrayal and death. What makes the map more than just magical is its emotional gravity. For Harry, the Marauders map is not merely a tool for sneaking out. It's a link to a father he never knew. When he sees the name Peter Pettigrew walking beside Ron Weasley's name on the map, he doesn't yet realize the storm it will unleash. But the map, in its silence, speaks volumes. It remembers the truth even when people lie. It doesn't forget the past, even when others try to bury it. The moment Harry first used it, sneaking into Hogsmeade through the secret passage behind the one-eyed witch, he felt the rush of his father's legacy. He didn't know then who the Marauders truly were. That realization came slowly, painfully, through a series of revelations. But it made every step he took on the map sacred. These were the footsteps his father once took, the walls his father once leaned against. The laughter echoing in the map's folds was James's, Sirius's, Remus's, and even, bitterly, Peter's. The tragedy of the map is that it encapsulates both joy and betrayal. 4 boys who once would have died for each other. And one of them did. James Potter died trusting Peter Pettigrew. Sirius spent 12 years in Azkaban for a crime he didn't commit. Remus wandered the fringes of the wizarding world, haunted and alone, and Peter, Wormtail, became the servant of Voldemort. The map, in its silence, carries their whole story. In one chilling moment in the book, Harry notices Peter's name again, alive, hiding in the castle. This realization is the turning point. The Marauders' map becomes more than a relic. It becomes a weapon. It uncovers a lie that reshapes Harry's entire understanding of the night his parents died. It sets the stage for the confrontation in the Shrieking Shack, where truths long buried claw their way into the light. The creation of the map itself remains unexplained in technical terms. How exactly they managed to enchant such a complex artifact is never detailed. But the spirit of it is more important than the spell work. It's an embodiment of their mischief, their love for each other, and their fearless hunger for discovery. In Lupin's words, they were the cleverest students Hogwarts had seen in a long time. The map was their final masterpiece. There's something poetic in the fact that the map ends up in Harry's hands, as if it waited, folded and patient, for the son of Prongs to carry on the mischief. Fred and George, who'd nicked it from Filch's office during their first year, had never unravelled all its secrets, but it responded to Harry. Perhaps it remembered James's magical signature, or perhaps, as Dumbledore once said, help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. The Marauders' map, unlike other magical objects, has personality. It reacts. It judges, it insults, and most curiously, it never lies. When Harry confronts the map with disbelief, seeing Peter's name where there should be none, it refuses to humour his doubt. That reliability makes it both terrifying and comforting. It knows the castle's truth, even when people would rather not. After Sirius's death, the map remains in Harry's possession. It becomes a private shrine of sorts, a way to feel close to the people he's lost. Even in the later books, the map appears in key moments. It helps track Draco Malfoy. It helps the DA organise. It helps Harry see Ginny one last time before he walks into the Forbidden Forest to meet Voldemort. In silence, the Marauders' map watches it all. We can't forget that the map also hides things. In the final books, Dumbledore's secrets remain buried despite the map's gaze. The Room of Requirement, for example, remains invisible. It is a reminder that even the Marauders didn't know everything. Hogwarts is a living place, and some of its magic resists even the cleverest charms. But the Marauders' map comes close. It is the most intimate document ever created within those walls. In a world brimming with powerful objects, the Elder Wand, the Invisibility Cloak, the Horcruxes, it's easy to overlook a piece of parchment. But this one is different. It doesn't kill, it doesn't corrupt, it reveals. And in doing so, it tells a story of 4 boys and the castle that shaped them, a story of laughter that echoes down the corridors even when the voices have long since fallen silent. The Marauders' map is more than a magical artifact. It is a memory etched in ink and spell, a love letter to Hogwarts, a whisper from the past, a tool for rebellion, and a reminder of loyalty. And in Harry's hand it is a legacy, a thread connecting him not just to his father, but to the wild, dangerous and beautiful friendship that once roamed the halls under the full moon, a friendship that still, somehow, lives on. Number 26. Why the Dursley home was protected. Of all the places in the wizarding world, few seem as mundane and unremarkable as number 4, Privet Drive. And yet beneath its neat garden and sterile curtains lay one of the most powerful magical protections ever woven. In the films, this truth flickers only briefly. Dumbledore mentions it once or twice, and there are hints of its significance, but for viewers unfamiliar with J.K. Rowling's original text, the true reason Voldemort could never simply march down Privet Drive and kill Harry Potter remained hidden in mystery. Why was this dull, square house the safest place in the world for the boy who lived? The answer begins not with spells or wands, but with a mother's love, an ancient form of magic that no Death Eater, no Dark Lord, could ever fully understand. When Lily Potter threw herself between Voldemort and her infant son, she invoked a magic older than Hogwarts itself. It was not in an incantation or a potion, but in the act of sacrifice. As Dumbledore explained to Harry in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, "Your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love." That love created a protection that clung to Harry like a second skin. But it had a condition, a rule that even Dumbledore could not bend. The magic would only remain in place so long as Harry could call home the house of someone who shared his mother's blood. That someone was Petunia Dursley, Lily's sister, a woman who had once begged Dumbledore in a letter to be admitted to Hogwarts and had been turned away. Bitterness festered in her heart, and when Lily died, Petunia could not bring herself to speak her sister's name with anything but disdain. Yet it was Petunia who became the reluctant guardian of Harry Potter, and in doing so, she unwittingly became the anchor of the magical protection that Dumbledore had cast. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore spells it out when speaking to Harry. While you can still call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, there you cannot be touched or harmed by Voldemort. He shed her blood, but it lives on in you and her sister. Her blood became your refuge. It wasn't just a sentimental notion. It was law, magical law rooted in Lily's ultimate act of selflessness. Petunia's very presence sustained it. That's why each summer Dumbledore insisted Harry return to the Dursleys, no matter how cruel they were to him. It was frustrating, even to readers. How could the great wizard Dumbledore force a child to live with people who locked him in a cupboard and called him a freak? But, as Dumbledore said, it may not be much of a home, but it's the only one you've got for now. As long as Harry could truthfully say that Privet Drive was his home, the protection endured, and Voldemort, the most dangerous wizard of all time, was kept at bay. Even Voldemort came to understand this magic, albeit too late. In the Half-Blood Prince, he tasked Draco Malfoy with the impossible: assassinate Albus Dumbledore. The assignment was a death sentence, but it was also an acknowledgement of Voldemort's growing desperation. He could not reach Harry where he lived, so he began targeting those around him. But never once did Voldemort send a Death Eater to the Dursleys. He knew better. Not even Bellatrix Lestrange, his most fanatical servant, dared trespass on that suburban threshold. The strength of that protection came into sharp focus in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, as the Ministry began to collapse and Voldemort's rise became unstoppable. The Order of the Phoenix knew time was running out. On the eve of Harry's 17th birthday, the date when the protective magic would finally unravel, they arranged a daring escape, knowing that the moment he left Privet Drive, he would become mortal prey. The house was no longer safe once Harry came of age. The protection, as Dumbledore had warned, would break and vanish. But there's more. In Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore's letter to Petunia is hinted at once more. When Petunia prepares to leave the house, she pauses at the door. "You didn't just lose a mother that night in Godric's Hollow, you know," she says to Harry. "I lost a sister." It's a quiet line, often overlooked, but it echoes the deeper magic at work, the ties of blood, the pain of family, and the lingering consequences of choices made in youth. Petunia had upheld her side of the protection, even if she never understood or accepted the magical world. She had kept Harry alive, and in doing so, she had kept the flame of Lily's sacrifice burning. One might ask, why didn't Dumbledore place Harry with a wizarding family instead? The Weasleys, for example, would have welcomed him with open arms, but they lacked the one thing that mattered: Lily's blood. Magic, in this case, demanded something more ancient than comfort or friendship. It demanded kinship, There is also a symbolic element. Number 4, Privet Drive, was a fortress of normalcy. The Dursleys were terrified of magic. They ironed their trousers and mowed their lawn and hated anything out of the ordinary. And yet they became guardians of the most extraordinary child in the world. Magic lived in their home, even if they loathed it. Their house became a paradox, both sanctuary and prison. For Harry, it was a place of safety but also neglect, a duality that reflects the complexity of love itself. And then there's the role of Dumbledore as architect of this protection. He made the choice to leave Harry with the Dursleys not only because of magical necessity, but because he believed hardship could shape character. In Order of the Phoenix, he tells Snape, "You know how and why he survived. Tell me now how and why the boy must die." Dumbledore saw the bigger picture. The pain of Harry's childhood was, in part, a crucible. It forged resilience, humility, and a heart that could resist the temptations of power. Harry's final summer at Privet Drive is marked by a solemn ceremony. Members of the Order arrive in the dead of night. Kingsley Shacklebolt, Mad-Eye Moody, Tonks and Lupin, they all gather for the departure. The Dursleys, too, are taken into hiding, escorted by Daedalus Diggle and Hestia Jones. "You are being protected," Hestia tells them, "because of the part you played in keeping Harry alive." Vernon scoffs, unable to grasp the magnitude of what he was part of. But readers know, they know what Petunia never said, what Dudley, in a rare moment of maturity, nearly whispers, "I don't think you're a waste of space." That moment between Harry and Dudley is perhaps the most unexpected proof that something had changed in that house. For all their cruelty, the Dursleys had not allowed him to die. They had given him a roof. And by doing so, they had carried Lily's love across the years. The protection wasn't in bricks or spells, it wasn't in passwords or charms, it was in blood, it was in sacrifice. And it was in the simple, stubborn fact that a sister had once held her nephew under her roof, even if she never showed him kindness. That was enough for magic to do its work. Dumbledore's design was never flashy. He preferred old magics, subtle and strong. He once said, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living and, above all, those who live without love." In protecting Harry through his aunt, he ensured that love, however twisted, however strained, had the final word. The moment Harry turns 17, the shield shatters. The enchantment no longer binds the house. Privet Drive becomes just another address in Surrey. But for 16 years it had been a fortress built not by stone, but by sacrifice. It stood not because the Dursleys cared, but because Lily had once chosen death, so her son might live. And so the boy who lived began his journey not in a castle, not in a tower, but in a cupboard under the stairs. The protection that shielded him did not come from wizards or warriors, but from a silent promise made in blood, a promise that Voldemort, with all his power, could never break. Number 27. Why Snape's memories changed everything. In the final moments of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, something remarkable happens. Harry Potter, who for years viewed Severus Snape as a cold, untrustworthy, even cruel figure, steps into the pensive and discovers the truth hidden behind years of bitterness and sarcasm. The memories Snape gives Harry are not just a final act of redemption. They are a window into a soul burdened by grief, loyalty, guilt, and undying love. They alter everything Harry believed to be true, not just about Snape, but about his parents, about Dumbledore, and about himself. As Harry dives into the pensive, he is taken back to a time before he was even born, to a wind-swept playground where a boy with greasy black hair watches a girl with red hair swing through the air. The girl is Lily Evans. The boy, of course, is Severus Snape. From the very beginning, the film hints at something deeper, but it is the book that shows the full tapestry. Snape loved Lily, not in the shallow way many teenagers claim love, but with a deep and consuming affection that never left him, even long after she married someone else and died. In Deathly Hallows, Rowling writes, "After all this time?" Dumbledore asks, stunned. "Always," replies Snape. That single word, perhaps more than any other in the series, contains the entirety of Snape's emotional journey. It's not just a declaration of love. It is a testament to enduring devotion, to the choices he made because of that love, and to the pain he carried every day after Lily's death. The quote became iconic for a reason. It reveals how Snape's entire adult life was driven by this single, haunting emotion. Harry sees more than a love story, though. He witnesses a tragedy. He watches a young Snape join the Death Eaters, trying to find power and purpose in a cruel world that offered him little else. He sees Snape's growing horror as he realizes that his loyalty to Voldemort may cost Lily her life. The horror becomes unbearable when he begs Dumbledore to hide the Potters, not for James, whom he hates, but for Lily. "Hide them all, then," Snape begs. "Keep them safe, please." But it is too late. Voldemort strikes. James dies first. Then Lily, standing between her son and the Dark Lord, is murdered. Snape's scream when he finds her body is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the book, though the film only gives it a brief glimpse. He clutches her corpse, surrounded by the wreckage of what could have been. Harry sees this in the pensive, and it destroys everything he thought he knew. Snape did not protect Harry out of duty to Dumbledore. He did it because every time he looked at the boy, he saw Lily's eyes. It was Dumbledore who realized the potential in that grief. When Snape came to him, begging for help, Dumbledore agreed, but with a condition. Harry had to be protected not for Lily's sake, but because it was right. And so Snape, the man who had once called Lily a mudblood, in a moment of youthful rage, took on the role of protector for her son. Not out of affection for Harry, but out of remorse, penance, and an unshakable loyalty to her memory. What changes Harry most is not just seeing Snape's love, it is seeing his sacrifice. For years, Snape was hated by students, mistrusted by his colleagues, and reviled by the very boy he swore to protect. And yet he never flinched. He risked his life daily, feeding Voldemort lies, playing the role of faithful Death Eater, while secretly reporting to Dumbledore. His double life was not glamorous. It was lonely, cruel, and riddled with danger. "He's been passing on information to the Order for over a year," Dumbledore once said, "and he's taken a great personal risk to do so. But even that doesn't fully explain the weight of Snape's burden. Harry sees Dumbledore sick and dying, asks Snape to be the one to end his life, to spare Draco from the soul-destroying act of murder. Snape hesitates, not because he lacks the courage, but because even for him this is a terrible price. "So the boy must die?" Snape asks, horrified. When Dumbledore confirms it, Snape is disgusted. "You've been raising him like a pig for slaughter." It is this moment that breaks Harry. Snape, the man he despised, had more concern for his life than the headmaster he admired. And not just concern, Snape didn't just passively follow orders. He wept, he argued, he fought for Harry's life, even knowing that in the end he might fail. The final piece is the Patronus. When Snape casts his silver dough identical to Lily's, Dumbledore stares in awe. Lily, after all this time? It is a magic so pure and personal that it can only be born from true love. Patronuses don't lie. Snape's dough tells Harry what words never could. His love was real and it shaped everything he did. Harry emerges from the pensive changed. The boy who hated Snape now understands him as perhaps the bravest man he ever knew. And that's why years later, standing on platform 934 with his own son, he says, "Albus Severus, you were named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was probably the bravest man I ever knew." That name, Severus, isn't just a tribute. It's an apology. It's Harry's way of honouring the truth. For so long, he misunderstood Snape, saw only the surface, the sneer, the insults, the bitterness. But the memories show him something far deeper. A man who made horrible mistakes, who lost everything, and who still chose to do what was right, even when no one would ever thank him for it. The tragedy of Snape is that he had to be hated to do his job. If Voldemort suspected his true allegiance, it would all be over. So Snape embraced the hatred. He took on the role of villain to be the hidden hero. Even his death was part of the plan. He believed that once Voldemort possessed the Elder Wand, he needed to kill Snape to master it, and Snape let him do it, never revealing the truth. When Harry sees that Snape died not in bitterness but with love in his heart, everything shifts. He remembers the insults, yes, the unfairness, the favoritism, but he also remembers the protection, the quiet spells cast when Harry wasn't looking, the unspoken safeguards that kept him alive, the fury in Snape's voice when someone threatened him, not because he liked the boy, but because he had sworn to protect Lily's son. There is one memory that lingers strongest in Harry's mind. It is not of Snape yelling or sneering. It is of a broken man cradling the body of the only woman he ever loved, whispering her name like a prayer. That pain, that depth of emotion, is something Harry understands more than anyone. He too has lost, he too has grieved. In that moment, he and Snape are no longer enemies. They are simply 2 people who loved the same woman and who both suffered for it. By naming his son after Severus, Harry does more than forgive him. He validates him. He tells the world that Snape mattered, that his story won't be forgotten. He gives his child not just a name, but a legacy of courage, of sacrifice, and of love that endures beyond death. So when people ask why Harry changed his mind, why he honoured a man who seemed to despise him, the answer lies in those memories. They are not just flashbacks, they are revelations. They show a life of pain transformed into purpose, a man who lived in the shadows to protect the light, and a love so powerful it shaped the fate of the wizarding world. For Harry, that is enough. For the rest of us, it's a reminder that even the coldest hearts can burn with unimaginable fire, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to love without hope of return. Number 28. Why Voldemort couldn't master the Elder Wand. In the final duel between Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort, as portrayed in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, viewers witnessed an epic and visually stunning confrontation. The Elder Wand, the most powerful wand in existence, famously turned against Voldemort in his final moment, sealing his defeat. But the explanation given in the film was fleeting, almost glossed over. A vital truth richly developed in the book was reduced to a simple magical twist. Yet behind that twist lies a story of allegiance, power, and a web of ownership that unfolds like a quiet whisper behind the roaring battles. To understand why the Elder Wand refused Voldemort, we must first understand the wand's nature. This wand is not like any other. Crafted by Death himself, according to the legend of the Deathly Hallows, it has passed from wizard to wizard through bloodshed, treachery, and conquest. As stated by Mr. Ollivander in the book, the wand chooses the wizard. That much has always been clear to those of us who have studied wand lore. But in the case of the Elder Wand, it goes further. It aligns itself with power, with victory. It does not simply obey, it judges. Voldemort believed that by killing Severus Snape, he would become the rightful master of the Elder Wand. His reasoning was cold and logical. Dumbledore was the previous owner, and Snape killed Dumbledore. Therefore, the wand's allegiance must have passed to Snape. So Voldemort, in a scene both tragic and horrifying, had Nagini slay Snape in the Shrieking Shack. It was brutal. Voldemort didn't even give Snape the mercy of a clean spell. He let his snake rip into him, all for the wand. But Voldemort's logic was flawed. He was playing by his own rules, not the wand's. The Elder Wand's allegiance had never passed to Snape. It had already chosen a new master before Dumbledore's death. That moment, quiet, swift, and nearly forgotten, occurred atop the astronomy tower when Draco Malfoy, trembling and reluctant, disarmed Albus Dumbledore. He did not kill him. But the disarming was enough. In the world of wand law, victory does not require murder, it requires mastery. As Dumbledore later tells Harry in that ethereal King's Cross chapter, Draco disarmed me that night, at the top of the astronomy tower. From that moment, the wand recognized him as its master. Draco Malfoy, unlikely as it seems, became the master of the Elder Wand, though he never touched it. He didn't even know it lay entombed with Dumbledore, but its allegiance had shifted. And then, in a moment easily overlooked, Harry defeated Draco, not in a duel of grandeur, but in the drawing room of Malfoy Manor. Harry wrested Draco's wand from his hand. That was enough. Victory had passed again. The wand's true loyalty shifted to Harry. This truth becomes the silent reason behind Voldemort's unraveling. He was wielding a wand that never truly obeyed him. He didn't conquer its master. He didn't even understand that the master was not Snape. That quiet thread of ownership, moving from Dumbledore to Draco to Harry, is the true weapon Harry holds. Not brute force, not greater spells, but understanding. When Voldemort casts the killing curse at Harry during the final duel, the curse rebounds. In the book, this moment is not a cinematic explosion of energy. It is a return of power, loyalty, and justice. Voldemort is defeated by his own hand. The wand spun high, dark against the sunrise, Rowling writes, and Harry caught it by the handle. It was not spectacle, it was destiny catching up. There's a poignant irony to it all. Voldemort, who feared death above all else, who believed only in domination and blood purity, never grasped the quiet forces that actually governed the wizarding world. He saw strength in force, not in loyalty. He saw power in murder, not in mercy. And because of this, he never understood the Elder Wand's soul. Yes, soul. For in the Potter universe, wands are more than tools. They are semi-sentient extensions of magic itself. One of the most emotional confirmations of the wand's true allegiance comes when Harry speaks directly to it after Voldemort's death. He doesn't keep it, he doesn't wield it. He uses it once to repair his own holly and phoenix feather wand, and then returns it to Dumbledore's tomb. If I die a natural death as master of the wand, its power will die with me, Harry says, choosing not power, but peace. This act completes the story arc, not just of Harry, but of the wand itself. For centuries, the Elder Wand has passed from hand to hand in violence. It has brought ruin, destruction, and madness to those who sought to command it. But in Harry it finds something new, contentment. He does not covet its strength, he releases it. That choice, more than anything, proves why he was its true master. Voldemort's downfall, then, was not just a product of his cruelty, but of his blindness. He never asked why the wand didn't work for him. He assumed the problem was external, that the wand needed more blood. He did not see the moral structure behind magic, the unwritten laws that guide loyalty, choice, and justice. In trying to force the wand, he broke himself. Rowling gives us subtle hints throughout the book about how wand allegiance works. When Harry first takes Draco's wand, he feels it. Something changed, he notices. It's not dramatic, but it's real. And again, when he holds the Elder Wand in his hand for the first time, he felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. That warmth isn't just magical, it's symbolic. The wand recognizes its master. It is a silent acceptance, a communion of magic and soul. Contrast that with Voldemort's experience. He rips the wand from Dumbledore's tomb with no reverence, no respect. He lifts it to the sky and shoots sparks like fireworks, trying to bend it to his will. But all the Elder Wand gives him are lies. It performs, yes, but weakly, uncertainly. Its magic is never as powerful in his hand as it should be. And in the end, it betrays him, not because it chooses Harry in that final moment, but because it always had. The film adaptation omits much of this nuanced history. We see the wand backfire, but not why. The dialogue is limited, the scenes rush forward, and for those unfamiliar with the books, it may seem like a convenient plot twist. But to readers, that moment is steeped in rich logic. It is not magic being fickle, it is magic being just. In truth, it is not Voldemort's spell that kills him, it is his misunderstanding. His own curse rebounds, not by Harry's strength, but by the wand's decision. A poetic ending for a man who sought to own death and was undone by the one object meant to master it. The Elder Wand's path is a narrative of consequence. Dumbledore planned it in part, hoping to end its trail of blood. "I was already dying," he tells Harry. "I wanted Draco to be the master of the Elder Wand, but never to know it." A clever plan. But magic, like fate, often outpaces our schemes. Draco becomes master, and then Harry, through an almost accidental duel. What Dumbledore began, Harry completes, not with death, but with a choice. That choice, the refusal to own the wand, resonates deeply. It is the anti-Voldemort choice. Where the Dark Lord takes, Harry gives. Where Voldemort steals, Harry returns. In doing so, he ends the Elder Wand's journey. No more blood, no more war, just rest. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this tale is that it doesn't end in a blaze of glory, but in quiet resolution. After all the chaos, the battles, the lives lost, Harry does not stand atop a throne of victory. He stands at a grave, returning a wand to sleep beside its old master. And in doing so, he becomes more than a hero. He becomes a peacemaker. That is why Voldemort could not control the Elder Wand. Not because he lacked strength, but because he lacked understanding. Not because he failed to kill, but because he failed to listen. And in a world built on magic, words, and